What is up, guys? My name is Roke. Back to my channel. Now, gotta catch 'em all is the signature slogan of Pokemon, and catching is one of the central mechanics in most of the games. But what if instead of following this pattern and catching Pokemon, we instead attempted to beat a Pokemon game without catching a single Pokemon? Well, join me today as I'm going to be attempting to find out if it is possible to beat Pokemon Fire Red. Here are the three rules in this playthrough. Number one, I cannot catch any Pokemon by physically throwing a Pokeball at them. Next up is I cannot use any Pokemon traded from another game. However, in-game trades are allowed as long as I can obtain them without catching a Pokemon. And number three is I cannot catch any HM Pokemon, even if they don't join the battle. That is still counting as catching them, so they will not be allowed. So without further ado, let's begin. After mashing through the dialogues, it was now time to pick my starter. And after a lot of thought and research, I decided to pick Bulbasaur for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's typing. Grass is simply a very good type in Kanto, good, as it's good against the first two gyms, resists the third gym, and can be a decent wall against the fourth gym, which is really so. As for why I didn't pick Squirtle or Charmander, well, Squirtle is good against the first gym, neutral against the second, and weak to two back-to-back gyms. Charmander is probably also the worst starter to pick in a playthrough. It's weak to the first two, neutral against the third one, and then good against the fourth one. And in this playthrough, I need a starter who I can rely on heavily because it's gonna be my only Pokemon for a decent chunk of this game. So that is why I picked Bulbasaur. I named it Ribbit, and then of course beat my rival in the very first rival battle. After beating my rival, I then made my way through Viridian Forest, which was a nightmare because Kakuna and Metapod were the bane of my existence, plus I didn't have any super effective damage against them. Then, it was time to take on Brock. Now, before taking on Brock, I did do a lot of training to make sure that River was at least level 12 because I knew that I would know Vine Whip, which would be very helpful because I did not want to stall out the battle. And of course, as expected, Judy went down to a single Vine Whip. Next up was Brock's ace, Onyx, who first went with Bind, thankfully didn't do much damage. I proceeded with a Vine Whip, which absolutely wrecked Onyx, meaning my first gym battle went very smoothly. And with this, I had gotten my very first gym badge, the Boulder Badge. After doing a lot of trainer battles, Ribbit eventually evolved into Ivysaur, giving me a major power boost. With my newly powered Ivysaur, I decided to take on Misty, and this battle went as smoothly as expected, as Ribbit easily dispatched her Staryu. Her Starmie was a bit of a challenge as it confused Ribbit, and not only that, Ribbit hit itself in its confusion. Thankfully, Leech Seed did keep Ribbit from being in the KO range and also kept. Thankfully, Leech Seed kept Ribbit healed enough where Starmie did not KO it. Plus, after fighting through confusion, Ribbit eventually pulled out the victory by landing another Bullet Seed to finally KO Starmie, giving me my second badge, the Cascade Badge. It was now time to take on my rival once again. He led with Pidgeotto, which, after some growls and nerfing its attack to the ground, I was able to pick up the victory. Unfortunately, it had landed a ton of sand attacks, which lowered my accuracy, meaning I had missed a ton of sleep powders. Plus, his Charmander proceeded to crit with his Ember, meaning I lost on my first attempt. On my second attempt, I was successful in beating his Charmander, but due to burn, I lost to a Rattata. On my third attempt, I was able to beat his whole team, but you can already see that things are getting a lot tougher. The next rival battle thankfully went a little bit better, as I now had a new strategy where I first put them to sleep, growl, and of course set up Leech Seed to keep Ribbit healthy. And that is how I easily took care of his Kadabra and Pidgeotto. As for his Charmeleon was a bit terrifying, but thankfully, thanks to Leech Seed and me being higher level, Ribbit eventually pulled out the victory. Finally was Eradicate, which surprisingly proved to be a little bit tougher to take out, but eventually Ribbit took it out. Next up was Lieutenant Surge. He led with Voltorb, which wasn't much of a challenge as I easily took it out. Next up was Pikachu. This battle went on longer than I expected due to me being fully paralyzed and his Raichu using double team, but eventually Ribbit walked out with the victory. After the gym battle, Ribbit finally evolved into Venusaur. Now, you've probably noticed that Venusaur has been my only Pokemon for the first three gyms. However, that is about to change because at Celadon City, I can get my hands on an Eevee. Now, I have already decided on which evolution I wanted to evolve it into, and I came to that conclusion after process of elimination. First off, Flareon is eliminated right off the bat. So it ultimately ended up being between Vaporeon and Jolteon, and I decided to go with Jolteon. Firstly, is its type. Electric is really helpful in the Elite Four as it's good against some of Lance's team and good against most of Lorelei's team. It's also good against my rival's Charizard and his Pidgeot, which Ribbit could use some help against. After getting the Eevee, I named it Sparky and immediately used a Thunderstone to evolve it into Jolteon. Now, I also can get my next team member here because after going to the Celadon City department store and gambling for a bit, which kids do not do, gambling is not good for you, I obtained an Abra and I then went to a guy who would trade me his Mr. Mime for an Abra, which is named Mimean. I also got the team for Psychic, which I immediately taught to Mr. Mime. With my two new team members, my next rival battle went a lot more smoothly, should I say, as Sparky and Mimean were easily able to handle most of my rivals' Pokemon. Without wasting any time, I immediately went to challenge Erica, and it was smooth sailing as Mimean absolutely swept through her whole team, giving me a dominant victory. After clearing out the fighting dojo, I got my next team member, Hitmonchan, which I named Sylvester. Now, it is worth mentioning that my Jolteon, yes, lost to my rival's Pidgeot, so, yeah, that was something. After clearing out the Sofco building, I got my hands on a Lapras, which I named Savior, and I also defeated Giovanni and got the Master Ball. I then challenged Koga at the gym, and my man took out his Muck. Savior made its debut and easily took out a Coughing, but got poisoned, and finally Ribbit took out Wheezing, giving me my 5th gym badge. Next up was Sabrina, and this was a fight I was quite worried about. Though her Kadabra went down easily thanks to a body slam, her Mr. Mime proved to be a little bit annoying due to baton passing. However, I did have a strategy that was by paralyzing all of them. I knew that the Psychic types were going to do a lot of damage, so I wanted to slow them down. Eventually, I did take out her Venomoth, thanks to Mimean. Then, her Mr. Mime fell to Savior. Finally, it was Sabrina's terrifying ace, Alakazam. I did get it down to very low health, but unfortunately, Sabrina had used a Hyper Potion plus had set up a Calm Mind the turn before, meaning my Psychics didn't do much damage. Then I brought in Sparky to paralyze it to slow it down. Unfortunately, Sparky also got paralyzed due to the Synchro Noise and also took a lot of damage from Future Sight. It also got fully paralyzed, meaning it fell the next turn to Psychic. I then brought in Savior. I had originally planned to use Body Slam because, well, Alakazam had terrible physical defense, but ultimately decided to go with Confuse Ray, hoping that Alakazam would either get fully paralyzed or hit itself. Alakazam unfortunately did not get fully confused or paralyzed and proceeded to one-shot Savior with his Psychic, meaning it was now a 1v1 with Mimean. Alakazam unfortunately did not get fully paralyzed or confused, but Mimean hung on after taking a Calm Mind boost to Psychic, then proceeded to hit Alakazam with a Psychic, which was a critical hit! Thankfully, the next turn, Alakazam got fully paralyzed, meaning Mimean beat Sabrina's ace, Alakazam. Now, I want to take a small moment to ask all of you to hit that subscribe button and like button, and comment down below W my man, because my man was an absolute clutch in that last gym battle. I then immediately went to Cinnabar Island and wasted no time in going to the Fossil Revive Station, or whatever it's called, and I got my last team member, Aerodactyl, which I named Alpha. I then took on Blaine. Saber easily took out his Growlithe with a Surf. Alpha then made its glorious debut, taking out Blaine's Ponyta with 1 Ancient Power, and then also took out Arcanine with 2 Ancient Powers due to Intimidate. Finally was his Rapidash, which also went down to an Ancient Power, giving me my 7th gym badge. Finally was Giovanni. I led the battle with Ribbit, which took out his first Rhyhorn but took a ton of damage, ultimately falling to his Dugtrio. Then I brought in Savior, who took out his Rhyhorn and Dugtrio. Next up was his Nidoqueen, which could not KO Savior with Earthquake, So Savior defeated it with a Surf. Finally was his Nidoking, which fell to My Man's Psychic. It was time to take on my rival for the second to last time. Sparky avenged his last defeat. Savior easily took out Rhyhorn. Alpha took out Execute. And then Sparky defeated his Gyarados. That was his Alakazam, which went down to 2 Earthquakes. Finally was his Charizard, which Alpha also defeated using 2 Ancient Powers, giving me a dominant victory. It was now time to take on the Elite Four, starting with Lorelei. I first paralyzed her Dewgong before getting hit with an Ice Beam. Unfortunately, her Ice Beam froze Sparky, which forced me to switch into Mimian. I decided to set up a Calm Mind to boost Mimian's special attack, and then Mimian one-shot Dewgong with a single Psychic. Next up was Lapras, which unfortunately Mimian could not KO due to its bulk. Due to the Citrus Berry, Lorelei did not heal her Lapras, which allowed Mimian to finish the job with another Psychic. Her Cloyster also fell soon after. Next up was her Slowbro, which unfortunately Mimian could not KO with a Psychic, which allowed it to get some damage, but Mimian hung on with only 22 HP and defeated the Slowbro with another Psychic. Finally was her Jinx, which again Mimian could not KO with a single Psychic, but thankfully Jinx missed its lovely kiss, which allowed Mimian to finish the battle. Only 3 Elite Four members remain. Next up was Bruno. He led with Onix, while I led with Savior. Savior, of course, easily KO'd his Onix with a single Surf. Next up was Hitmonchan, which unfortunately Alpha could not KO with a Fly, leaving it only on what seems to be 1 HP. Allowed Hitmonchan to land a Rock Tomb, which lowered Alpha's speed. Bruno, of course, healed his Hitmonchan the next turn, but thankfully 2 more Aerial Aces later, Hitmonchan finally fell. Next up was Bruno's Machamp, which again Alpha could not KO with a single Aerial Ace, which allowed Machamp to get off his scary face. Thankfully, again, due to the Citrus Berry, this caused Bruno not to heal his opponent, as I decided to go with a Fly. His Machamp did land a devastating cross chop, but thankfully Alpha hung on and landed a critical Fly, defeating Machamp. Savior also took out the next Onix with another single Surf. Finally was Hitmonlee, and Alpha one-shot his Hitmonlee with a single Fly. Next up was Agatha, and this was a fight that I was quite worried about, especially since I didn't have any super effective damage against her ghost types. I first paralyzed her first Gengar as it landed a double team, which was scary at first. I then decided to switch into Alpha, as Alpha had Aerial Ace, and though I did get poisoned, thanks to some luck, Alpha ultimately came out on top. Next up was her Arbok, which again Mimian could not KO with a Psychic. So, on her healing turn, I decided to set up a Calm Mind, boosting my special attack and guaranteeing my next Psychic KOs. And as expected, it absolutely destroyed Arbok. Next up was Golbat, which Sparky easily took out with a single Thunderbolt. Against her next Gengar, I decided to land a Thunder, hoping that it would do a lot of damage. It did, but unfortunately, Gengar put Sparky to sleep. Eventually, Sparky woke up and landed a Thunder Wave, but ultimately fell to a Shadow Ball. I then swapped to Alpha, and unfortunately, 1 Aerial Ace could not finish off Gengar, meaning Alpha took a lot of damage from Shadow Ball and with the poison. Agatha eventually healed up Gengar. Unfortunately, due to the poison, Alpha got down to a mere 26 HP, which caused me to have to heal. Thankfully, 1 more Ancient Power and a Hypnosis Miss, I finished it off with an Aerial Ace. Finally was our Haunter, which Alpha did a lot of damage with Ancient Power, but Haunter, seeing it had no chance to win against my team, committed suicide. Finally was Lance. His Gyarados went down to a single Thunderbolt. Savior took down his first Dragonair with a single Ice Beam. His Aerodactyl proved to be a little bit of a challenge, but thankfully, after some healing on my side, and Savior able to live a Hyper Beam, Savior ultimately came out on top. Next up was his second Dragonair, which Sylvester did a lot of damage with Sky Uppercut, but unfortunately got paralyzed. I clicked Mach Punch hoping that would KO Dragonair. It unfortunately did not, and it landed an Outrage. I decided to heal up Savior on the next turn because I was worried about his Dragonite. I then decided to try and get as much damage as I possibly could before Sylvester went down. Lance eventually healed his Dragonair, and I then landed another Mach Punch, which did a little bit of damage. But he eventually switched out his Dragonair for his Dragonite, and Sylvester got fully paralyzed for 2 turns in a row, meaning Sylvester fell to Dragonite after a single wing attack. I then swapped into Sparky and then proceeded to paralyze the Dragonite to slow it down and hoping that it would get fully paralyzed. I then decided to fire off as much damage as I possibly could before Sparky went down. I landed a Thunder, which unfortunately didn't do much damage, as his Dragonite went for a safeguard. I then decided to go with another Thunderbolt and fear that Thunder might miss. Thunderbolt did a lot of damage due to a critical hit, and Dragonite got fully paralyzed. However, again, thanks to the Citrus Berry, Lance did not heal his Dragonite, meaning one more Thunderbolt took out his Dragonite, which was another critical hit. Then was his final Dragonair, which Savior again took down with a single Ice Beam. The Elite Four was done, and now it's time to take on my rival for the last time. My rival started the battle with Pidgeot, while I started with Sparky. I immediately hit it with a Thunder Wave to slow it down and maybe get a full paralysis if I'm lucky. I then swapped over to Alpha, whose Ancient Power did a lot of damage, but unfortunately due to the Feather Dance, my next Aerial Ace did a pitiful amount of damage. But I decided not to switch and stayed in, hitting it with another Ancient Power, which thankfully was enough to take down Pidgeot, which also gave me an Omni Boost. I then switched to Sparky to take down his Gyarados, who went down easily after a single Thunderbolt. Next up was my rival's Rhydon, which I decided to take down with Ribbit, setting up a Leech Seed on turn 1, and then easily defeating it with a single Razor Leaf. Up was my rival's Alakazam, who went down after 2 Earthquakes. I then had to heal up Alpha due to taking a lot of damage against Alakazam due to Psychic, but thankfully, after some healing, I easily took out his Executor. Was my rival's starter, which went down easily after a single Ancient Power. So I had succeeded in beating Pokemon Fire Red with a team which I caught none of, which is overall, I gotta say, is a very cool and awesome team.